Today our discussion is going to switch from adding and subtracting to multiplying and dividing fractions. So again, I'm going to ask you to practice these with numbers only, and then you can see we're going to go to variables. So it's important that you know how to do with numbers first, and then we'll switch to variables. So multiplying fractions simply are multiplying the numerators and multiplying the denominators together. But what makes that a little bit tougher is that sometimes you have to reduce, and to reduce a fraction, especially when you get bigger numbers, that's hard. So there's going to be another idea that we look at, and that idea is to reduce first before we multiply. So if you look at this fraction a little differently, I'm going to ask myself, is there a number that goes into the top number or a bottom number? And it doesn't really matter if it's on top of each other, just as long as it's the top and the bottom. So if I look at the number 3 and 6, I know that the number 3 and 6 both are divisible by 3. So I'm going to factor that out first and simplify. And we do that simply by saying 3 goes into 3 once and 3 goes into 6 twice. We'll check any other numbers that go in, and we see that there's not a number that goes into 11 or 8, and there's nothing that goes into 2 or 11. So now we're stuck. Now we simplify, multiply across, we get 11, multiply the 2 and the 8, and we get a 16. So that's what I want you to look for when we're multiplying. First, look for factors on the top and the bottom that can be reduced, and then it will save you a step of reducing. So if we look at problem 2, before we can do that, again, we want to, the first thing we must do is change to what's called improper fractions. So improper fractions are when the top is bigger than the bottom. And so let me remind you how to do that. We say 4 times 6 plus the 1 will be 25, 6. Times, we'll keep it times. This negative can be anywhere I like to put it in the numerator. So 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. And then we just put that negative on the outside of that fraction. So that's our first step, is to change to improper fractions. The second step is to look at any common factors. And again, it doesn't really matter, but it's a common factor on the top and the bottom. So it just so happens that the 3 is common on the top and the bottom again. And then what we'll do is we'll just multiply the numerators together and multiply the denominators together. So if we do that, 25 times a negative 1 is a negative 25, and 2 times 2 is 4. We've been doing some reducing. How do we reduce an improper fraction? We go 4 goes into 25 6 times with 1 left over. So our final answer will be 6 and 1/4. Where do we put that negative? We just put that on the outside. So make sure you, on your notes, you highlight steps 1, 2, and 3. Don't just put the answer of 6 1/4. Okay, now we're going to talk about dividing. So what we need to know is dividing is similar to multiplication, but when we divide, we copy the first fraction and we change division to multiplication, and we flip the second fraction. So the rules for dividing will end up being similar to the rules of multiplication, but the first thing you have to do is we always copy the first fraction. we change division to multiplication, and we flip the second fraction. This is sometimes called dividing fractions. Is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal, and the reciprocal is the flip fraction. So again, let's look for common factors. There's nothing common in the top or the bottom fractions. So if there's nothing common, we can't cancel out, and we'll just go to step 3, which is multiply the numerators together and multiply the denominators together. We'll look to see if we can reduce. If we can't, we are done. So that one looked pretty simple, but again, your key to this is changing division to multiplication. And when you do that, you always take the reciprocal of the second fraction. So make those notes clear. When I go to the mixed fraction practice, we'll go from there. 4, we copy our first fraction. And again, I don't know if you see a 1 in the denominator, but you should. We'll change the division to multiplication, and we flip the second fraction. Now in this case, there is a factor that's on the top and the bottom, and 2 goes into 2 once, and 2 goes into this 2 once. So we can now multiply the numerators together. A -1 times a 5 is a -5. This 1 times this -1 is also a -1. You should remember that a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and 5 will be our final answer. Problem number 5 is a mixed fraction. A mixed fraction, again, when we have mixed with multiplying and all of our fractions, we want to change to improper. So improper, this fraction would be 9/2. The improper fraction of this would be 1 times 9 plus 5 is 14/9. If you don't want to do that first step, we can take our 9/2. Remember, division is multiplication. Then you flip the fraction, and we look to see if there's a common factor in the numerator. Is there a number that 9 goes into 2 or 14? There isn't. So we're stuck with just multiplying the numerators together and the denominators together. To get final answers, we will have to reduce. So remember how to reduce an improper fraction. We start with a division problem. 28 goes into 81, about 3 times. Check my math here. That's 84, so that's too much. So must only go in there 2 times. So 28 goes into 81 2 times. That would be a 56. To get the remainder, we'll subtract. So 28 goes into 81 2 whole times, with a remainder of 25 over 28. Sometimes when we have mixed fractions, we have to change to improper. Again, 4 times 7 is 28, plus 3 will be 31/7. If you can keep in mind, this fraction is over 1, so if I change my divide to multiply, I flip. I can do that in 1 step. Look for common factors. There aren't any, so we multiply the numerators and the denominators together, and 7 times 10 is equal to 70. try to reduce. There's nothing common in 31 and 70, so our final answer. Next, I just want to remind you again about some geometry skills. How do you find an area of a figure? If the area is a box, you just take length times width. So the length of this box is 7 inches. The width is 5.9. When we punch that on the calculator, we will get inches squared is our units. Sometimes we call those square inches. So if we punch 7 times 5.9, we'll get, check my math here, I think 41.3 inches squared would be your final answer. The formula for finding the area of a triangle is area of a triangle, think of that as half of a box. So we'll take area of triangle is 1/2 base times the height. If we're given the base is the length on the bottom of a triangle. The height is how tall the triangle is. Again, when we're taking our multiplication, we can just multiply this on our calculator. And again, we have inches, or here we have feet and feet. When we multiply final answers, we should have square feet, and we write that feet squared.